It's been over a year since the Funny Frog Show ended, and my Marcy Wu brain rot still hasn't subsided. Autism, am I right? It's gotten to the point where it possessed me to scrap my original plans for this upload, to talk more about her instead. This is the second time that this has happened, and it likely won't be the last. However, this time around, we won't be focusing exclusively on God's gift to mankind, as we'll be digging into her relationship with Sasha, the white girl. Which is really funny since I've spent years being completely indifferent towards Sasharcy, only to get hyperfixated on the pair literally the week before I started writing this video. Again, autism, am I right? Anyways, it's no secret that the most talked about and loved aspect of Amphibia is the relationship between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. The three of them had such a captivating dynamic that you really didn't see often in kids' cartoons. Despite being best friends, the three's relationship was beyond toxic, and throughout the show, you watched them grow and gradually recognize the faults in their relationship, as well as how they each contributed to it being so bad. However, the one major complaint that many fans have about this relationship is that while we see Anne's dynamic with Sasha and Marcy as individuals, as well as the three's general group dynamic, we get very little insight into Marcy and Sasha's relationship. While it's only natural that their most important and well-defined relationship would be with Anne, given that she's the main character, it's still kind of ridiculous that we basically get nothing on Sasha and Marcy as a duo. With Sasha's development in Season 2 focusing squarely on her relationship with Anne, and Marcy spending most of Season 3 either in a coma or possessed by a hive mind of douchebag colonizers, giving them little time for any meaningful interactions. Sasha doesn't even have that much of a reaction to Marcy's stabbing, due to Disney seemingly forbidding Amphibia Season 3 from acknowledging Marcy or her graphic near-death for the vast majority of it. And yes, I am still bitter about it. Thanks for asking. My god, girl, you deserve so much better. I mean, there are some things that are kind of implied about their relationship, but what little that's there either isn't elaborated on, or is nothing more than an extension of their individual relationships with Anne. As disappointing as it is, though, the more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that the combination of the lack of focus on Sasha and Marcy's relationship, and Marcy being completely ignored for the vast majority of Season 3, led the show to unintentionally give Sasha and Marcy a really fascinating dynamic that's toxic in a way that's exclusive to them. These factors led me to believe that for the vast majority of Amphibia, Marcy and Sasha don't actually care about each other. Despite Matt Browley and Amphibia's attempts to portray all three Calamity Girls as being incredibly close to each other, I don't see Sasha and Marcy as friends, but rather two people who are both friends with Anne and not much else. Now, before all of the Sasharcy shippers come after me in the comments, I just want to say that I'm not trying to pass this analysis off as fact. I'm not on some game theory bullcrap or anything. Rather, this is just how I've personally come to interpret Sasha and Marcy's relationship. Also, when I say that these two don't care about each other, I don't mean that as a criticism of Sasha and Marcy's characters. In fact, viewing their relationship through this lens led me to gain a newfound appreciation for Sasharcy. With out of the way, back to the analysis. Now, back in the Marcy video, as in the one where I went, whenever Marcy's not on screen, all the other characters should be asking, where's Marcy? For 25 minutes straight in complete earnest, and I will never apologize. While Amphibia seemingly being unable to acknowledge Marcy in any meaningful way for the vast majority of Season 3, made it look like Anne and Sasha didn't care that one of their best friends might be dead, the two of them truly did care about Marcy. However, while Marcy clearly means the world to Anne, looking back on the show and examining what little we get of Sasha and Marcy's relationship, I've kind of come to the conclusion that, for the vast majority of the show, Sasha didn't really care about Marcy. Now, that isn't to say that I think Sasha hated Marcy, but judging by everything we see of the three, it's very clear that Sasha was way more invested in Anne. Pre-Amphibia, while Sasha was very controlling of Anne, she did genuinely enjoy her company, and by all accounts saw her as a true friend. Meanwhile, Sasha just seemed dismissive of Marcy. While this is supposed to be a fault that she shares with Anne, and despite infantilizing Marcy, you can tell that she truly did love her. Meanwhile, the first time we see Sasha talk about Marcy, it's her disinterestedly saying that she's going to get herself killed. Pretty much all of the scenes where the trio are together before Amphibia show Sasha either being annoyed by Marcy or just kind of ignoring her. Once the three are in Amphibia though, Sasha and Marcy's relationship is kind of non-existent, especially on Sasha's end. I mean, she isn't actively annoyed by or dismissive of Marcy here, but like back on Earth, her attention is squarely on Anne. It's like what Anne said in Marcy's journal. Marcy's role in their friend group was that she was just kind of there. And unlike Anne, who still cared deeply for Marcy despite neglecting her, it doesn't seem like Sasha ever formed any sort of connection with Marcy, and was entirely uninterested in trying to relate to her, leaving Sasha completely unable to understand Marcy even on the most basic level. More than anything, it honestly comes across like Sasha saw Marcy as just some girl that she had to deal with sometimes if she wanted to hang out with Anne, because I don't buy for a second that these two ever spent one-on-one time with each other. This is best exemplified in Turning Point, where Sasha monologues about how she messed things up with Anne, and no one else. Now, Matt Browley claims that Sasha also wanted to make things right with Marcy, but she didn't say that. Now, did she? I don't care if it was because of executive meddling. Sasha was way more upset over ruining things with just Anne than she was seeing Marcy get stabbed through the chest. While seeing Sasha still not thinking about or mentioning Marcy, even after seeing her nearly die, is unintentionally hilarious in a really screwed up way, when you really stop and think about how Sasha has consistently shown little interest or concern in Marcy, especially when compared to Anne, this reaction kind of makes sense for her. I'm sure seeing Marcy get stabbed was upsetting for her, but honestly, anyone would be upset seeing a person get stabbed, even a complete stranger, and her reaction this episode, intentional or not, perfectly reflects how Sasha is way more invested in Anne than she is in Marcy. Now, if Anne were in Marcy's position, I genuinely believe that Sasha would be far more devastated, because while Anne means the absolute world to her, Marcy is just kind of a girl that she knows. I don't think that this is Sasha being actively malicious or spiteful towards Marcy or anything. I just think that she's so utterly detached from her that Sasha still can't help but prioritize Anne and not really think about Marcy, even after seeing her almost die. What makes the toxicity of Sasha and Marcy's relationship all the more tragic is that they have a lot in common and are going through some very similar things. In true colors, both Sasha and Marcy are revealed to have selfishly betrayed each other in different ways. However, while Marcy, unlike Anne, isn't even mad at Sasha and tries in vain to prevent any further conflict, once Marcy's betrayal is revealed, Sasha, despite betraying her friend's trust literally that same day for similarly selfish reasons, wants absolutely nothing to do with Marcy, even after she reveals that she was motivated by a desire to not be alone or be separated from her best friends. Sasha should be able to relate to this, given how she was dealing with her own feelings of loneliness throughout Season 2 that also stemmed from the Calamity Trio's toxic codependency, but the degree that Sasha's emotionally distant from her prevented her from empathizing with Marcy. Hell, even in the beginning of the end, even after all of her character development, Sasha initially still struggles to understand why Marcy did what she did, even though we see in the dinner that Sasha knows what it's like to feel like a third wheel. She should be able to relate to Marcy here, but again, there's just such a massive disconnect between the two that Sasha is completely incapable of connecting the dots on her own, and Anne literally has to spell out to her that they mistreated Marcy back on Earth for her to finally start to somewhat understand Marcy as a person. Again, this isn't a bad thing or a failing on the show's part. I just think that it's a testament to how utterly fucked up Sasha and Marcy's relationship was. It shows that even after Sasha's character growth, there's still a lot about herself that she still needs to work on, and I think that makes her an even more interesting character. That said, it does kind of suck that Amphibia doesn't draw more attention to Sasha and Marcy's similarities. It's clear that we were supposed to see the way Sasha handled Marcy's betrayal as hypocritical on her end, but the show only really addresses the parallels between them in the broadest sense through Anne telling Sasha that they've all made mistakes and that their friendship's worth fixing. Also, I didn't know where else in the video to put this point, but do you remember that one episode in Season 3B where Sasha immediately expresses far greater empathy and understanding towards the two-headed Olm twins that she just met than she did towards Marcy at that point, and as they're going on about how everyone deserves a second chance, while still not forgiving Marcy? And the episode in question doesn't bring this up at all? Unlike in True Colors, I genuinely have no idea whether or not Sasha's hypocrisy was intentional here, and it's really bizarre that the episode never actually addresses this, because it seemed like the perfect opportunity to properly set up her struggle to forgive and understand Marcy. There's a part of me that believes that this was Matt Browley's original intention here, but Disney's refusal to let the show seriously address Marcy until the multi-episode episode finale prevented that from happening and left the episode feeling really off and kind of a pointless waste of time. Which, to be fair, is perfectly in line with how weird and pointless most of Season 3B was outside of those phenomenal final 3 episodes. God, Season 3B makes me sad. Oh, but don't you think for a second that my undying love for Marcy prevents me from recognizing that she also contributed to how uniquely toxic her and Sasha's relationship was? Okay, confession time. When I said that Sasha and Marcy didn't care about each other, I wasn't being completely honest. While I still think that Sasha was generally apathetic towards Marcy for most of Amphibia, I actually do think that Marcy cared about Sasha, or at the very least, she thought she did. The reality is, though, that Marcy's care for Sasha was completely shallow. From what we see of them as a trio, Marcy suffered from the same issues as Anne when dealing with Sasha. She let Sasha boss her around and treated her more like an idol than a friend. However, while Anne gradually shows more backbone against Sasha and becomes far more willing to call her out on her crap, the same can't be said for Marcy, who, from the few interactions she had with her in Season 2, was completely willing to go with whatever Sasha wanted, and preferred to play peacekeeper between Anne and Sasha instead of actually standing up to her or addressing the toxicity in their dynamic, which ties into Marcy's issue of not wanting to confront her problems. Marcy would have much rather have continued to pretend that Sasha was this amazing hero who could do no wrong, which in turn led to her unwittingly putting pressure on Sasha to live up to her and Anne's ideal vision of her. Unlike Anne, who she treated like a genuine friend, Marcy is never really sincere or honest with Sasha, with most of their interactions amounting to Marcy blindly following and praising her. That's because, while she might not have realized it, like how Sasha wasn't interested in Marcy, Marcy wasn't interested in Sasha as a person. Rather, she was interested in the idea of Sasha, the idea of her being this knight in shining armor. Marcy just wanted to see Sasha as this infallible hero, instead of the deeply flawed person that she was. It's likely that Marcy genuinely believed that glorifying Sasha and bending to her every whim made her a good friend, but this just enabled all of her worst traits and created a power imbalance in their relationship. Marcy's unquestioning obedience simply wasn't what Sasha needed in order to grow as a person. What I find to be really interesting about all of this is that by the time they leave Amphibia, there's nothing indicating Marcy realized that, like Anne, she treated Sasha more like an idol than a person, and the way that it contributed to how awful and codependent the Calamity Trio's relationship was. While this was almost certainly unintentional, and a result of the show not giving much attention to Marcy and Sasha's relationship, I think that it kind of shows that even with the progress Marcy's made in bettering herself, like Sasha, she doesn't quite have the same level of introspection that Anne does, and still has some growing left to do. So yeah, despite the show claiming otherwise, I don't think that Marcy and Sasha were ever truly friends. The story of these two, at least the way I interpret it, is one of shallowness and insincerity. In a lot of ways, they were even worse friends to each other than they were to Anne. While they might have believed otherwise, their friendship was one that was completely devoid of true care, where neither saw the other as an actual person. That is, until the epilogue. In the show's epilogue, where we revisit the Calamity Trio 10 years later, we get to see Marcy and Sasha interact on their way to celebrate Anne's birthday. It's easily the most time we've ever spent seeing these two interact one-on-one, and my god, the difference here is night and day. Unlike before and during the events of Amphibia, where I found it hard to believe that these two were all that close, this couldn't be further from the truth in the epilogue. The Marcy and Sasha we see here feel like honest-to-God lifelong friends. While their scene together is brief, there's this far greater sense of sincerity and genuine care on display here that we never saw them express to each other before. Sasha isn't treating Marcy like a burden, Marcy isn't acting like Sasha can do no wrong. These are two people who are genuinely interested in one another, and who view each other as equals. My personal headcanon is that at some point, probably after high school, despite still keeping in touch, and their relationship being in a much better place than it was before, after years of introspection, Sasha and Marcy both came to the gradual realization that, even after everything they've been through together, between Marcy idolizing Sasha and Sasha barely paying attention to Marcy back when they were kids, they never got to know each other all that well. So they decided that they wanted to fix that and try to find more common ground. I'd personally like to think that this started with Marcy getting Sasha into My Hero Academia. Over time, as the two learned more about each other, Sasha and Marcy came to realize that they have a lot more in common than they initially thought, and their relationship slowly became something truly truly genuine. Despite how emotionally distant from each other they were for the majority of Amphibia, by the epilogue, after years of growth and healing, it seems as though Sasha and Marcy really put in the effort to better their relationship and learn to truly love each other the same way that they both love Anne. And that's just kind of beautiful. In a way, it makes their brief interaction in the epilogue go from just a neat little moment to being actually really heartwarming. I don't know, I just think that Marcy and Sasha having to learn to genuinely care about each other is a really interesting concept that I think makes perfect sense for those two, and gives their dynamic the distinct identity it deserved. Overall, despite several of the show's writing decisions, and Disney's likely interference with season 3, making Sasha and Marcy's relationship with each other look shallow and even more toxic than what Matt Bradley intended, it also gave them a dynamic that was unique to them, and not just an extension of their respective relationships with Anne. So yeah, that was another analysis on Polyamory, the show. What are your thoughts on Sasharcy? Do you wish it got more focus? Why am I even asking that when the answer is obviously yes? Feel free to discuss in the comments below if you like. Maybe even consider subscribing if you want to hear more of me rambling on about cartoons. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to continue to obsess over the Marcy Wu centric AU that I created. That will never exist outside of my head. God, I wish I wasn't lazy.